Welcome to sleep with myth. Close your eyes and let the world fade away. Tonight we drift beyond time, where gods dream and stories remember their light. Before the stories of heroes were sung, before cities crowned the coasts of the Aegean, there was an island that did not sleep. The island trembled. Deep beneath its rocky skin, fire tossed and turned like a restless dream, pressing against stone, searching for a way to breathe. Mortals who lived on the slopes called it a cursed place. They whispered that if you listened closely at night, you could hear the earth groan, and beneath that groan, a god's broken heart. Because below the island, within the hollow belly of a mountain, Hephaestus worked alone. The god of fire and the forge, the lame one, the cast-out child of Hera. His workshop was a world of its own. A cavern carved from molten rock, lit by rivers of lava that pulsed like veins of a sleeping giant. Hammers rang in slow, steady rhythm. Sparks flew, metal sang, but in the pauses between each strike, there was silence. Not the peaceful kind, the heavy kind, the kind that sits beside you when no one else will. Hephaestus stood over an anvil the size of a chariot, his broad shoulders hunched, his hands blackened with soot and ash. His leg, twisted and weak, dragged slightly behind him, each step leaving a faint scar in the dust. Above him, unseen, the world of Olympus glittered, a place of wine and laughter, of flawless faces and golden thrones, a place where he had once belonged, and from which he had been thrown. Thrown because he was not beautiful, not perfect, not worthy of a goddess's pride. His fall had torn the sky, split the air, and when he struck the earth, mountains formed around him. The island had grown over his pain. The fire beneath it had taken his side. Now, in the heart of the mountain, with flame for company and stone for walls, Hephaestus created wonders for the very gods who had wounded him. Helmets that gleamed like captured lightning, shields that turned aside storms, jewels that shone with the light of buried stars. And each time his work was carried up to Olympus, praise followed the gift. But the praise never reached him whole. By the time it drifted through the thick skin of the mountain and settled over his forge, it had already cooled. Hephaestus heard only echoes. He wiped the sweat from his brow, though the heat did not bother him. He reached for a new ingot of metal, but his hand stopped halfway. A tremor moved through his chest, something old and tired. He sat on a block of cooled stone and listened. The mountain grumbled softly. Lava flowed in slow, glowing streams. Sparks drifted and faded. "You burn," he murmured to the fire around him. "But you cannot leave." His hand brushed the rough floor. "Just like me." He remembered Hera's face, cold and sharp. Zeus turning away, the silence that swallowed him as he fell. He had shouted as he fell, "I am still yours." They had not answered. Now, centuries later, their silence still echoed through his bones. He bent his head and swallowed the weight in his throat. A tear slipped down his soot-streaked cheek, fell to the stone. The mountain shuddered. Light glowed where the tear had fallen. Lines of molten color spread outward. something new began to form. A river born from fire and from a god's tears. Deep beneath the island, deeper than any mortal dream could sink, the river woke. It began as a thin line of glowing orange, trickling through a crack where Hephaestus' tear had fallen. At first it was shy, a thought not yet spoken. It slid through hollow spaces beneath the mountain, filling old wounds left by ancient fire. It was not lava, though it carried heat. It was not water, though it learned to flow. It was a river of molten light, glimmering gold, crimson, and flickers of blue. The color of the sky Hephaestus no longer saw. As it moved, it listened. Rivers listen to everything. This one listened to the mountain's heart, to old anger trapped in stone, to the echo of the god's hammer, to the quiet ache beneath each strike. It understood. It was made from sorrow, from longing, from a love with nowhere to go. The river searched, left where stones softened, right where earth leaned away, downward where old fire made tunnels. It gathered memories, fragments of Olympus, gleaming marble, laughter in distant halls, a sky too bright to remember without pain. The river dreamed, and in its dreaming grew a wish, not to punish Olympus or extinguish its light, but something gentler, to be seen, to be known, to be loved not for what it created, but for what it was. Night after night, Hephaestus hammered above it, unaware of the life beneath his forge. His tears fell again. The river absorbed each one, glowing brighter. Then it found a crack leading upward. Slowly, carefully it rose. It reached a narrow crevice. A faint glow escaped into the night. For the first time the river felt the breeze. It did not yet see the stars. It did not yet see the sky, but it tasted the space between earth and heaven. It wanted more. The island's nights shimmered. A glowing line traced the mountain slopes, a thread of ember weaving down to the shore. Children pointed. Fishermen whispered, "It's an omen." The river of Hephaestus' tears flowed toward the sea. It cooled slightly, forming a shell of obsidian, but its heart still glowed. One night, it reached a cliff. Below, the sea breathed in its sleep. The river paused. It had never seen so much movement, so much space. Above it, the sky opened. Clouds drifted. Stars pulsed. The moon laid a silver path across the water. The river remembered Olympus, but this light was gentler. It surged forward. A waterfall of molten light spilled into the sea. Steam erupted in great clouds. The sea roared. The river hissed. For a moment it feared it would die, but the sea held it. "I know you," the sea murmured. "You are sorrow. You are fire. You are a god's unshed words." "I am a dream," said the river. "A dream that has never seen the sky." "Then look," the sea said. The steam parted. The river saw its reflection trembling on the waves, felt small and hopeful. "Do you wish to disappear?" the sea asked. "No," the river said. "I wish to be forgiven." "Then let others touch you." The river did not understand, but it listened. All rivers listen. Far above, Hephaestus slept, unaware that his tears had reached the world he longed for. The river had changed. What once shimmered with cool silver now rippled with a warmth that did not belong to water. A faint glow pulsed beneath its surface, soft as a heartbeat, gentle as breath. No mortal could have seen it and understood, but the river knew. It felt the ember inside it, the one gifted by Hephaestus, and it sensed that something ancient was beginning to awaken. For nights uncounted, the ember had rested deep within the river's current, quiet and sleeping. But the river felt its heat growing, felt it hum with a song older than the dawn. It did not hurt the water, instead, it warmed it with a kind of love, a kind of memory, as if the ember remembered what it meant to be alive. And the river, though born of nature and not flame, found itself dreaming again. In its dream, the river stood not as water but as a shimmering figure of light. Across from it was Hephaestus, on a plain of glowing coal that stretched farther than sight. The air shimmered with heat, yet felt soft, as if warmth itself had hands, lifting gently around the river dream. "My child," Hephaestus said, his voice a distant rumble. "You carry something precious." The river dream touched its chest, feeling the soft red glow pulsing like a hidden star. "Why me?" it asked. "Why give your ember to water? My opposite?" Hephaestus smiled, though sadness flickered in his eyes. "Because opposites understand each other more deeply than anything else. Flame knows hunger, but water knows healing. Flame creates, but water remembers." He stepped closer, sparks forming petals beneath his feet. "The ember inside you is not just fire," he continued. "It is a piece of my sorrow and a piece of my hope." The glowing plain melted away into darkness alive with countless stars. One small star drifted forward, speaking softly. "You hear us, little river. We are forgotten sparks, fires that never found their purpose." The river understood. The ember was a memory, a story never allowed to burn. "What must I do?" it whispered. "Let it become what it was meant to be," the star replied. "Let it breathe." The river awoke. Its waters glowed brightly, the ember pulsing like a heart learning its rhythm. It felt called toward the world's oldest mountain, Hephaestus' Forge. The river surged forward, flowing through forests and mountains. Where it passed, frost melted, leaves shimmered, and animals paused to drink from its golden glow. But deep beneath the earth, ancient shadows stirred. Flame and water should never become one, they hissed. The river did not hear them, felt only destiny's pull. Reaching the mountain, the river rose in a spiral of glowing mist. Higher and higher it climbed, the ember shining bright. Inside the forge, Hephaestus lifted his head. "It is time," he whispered, and the river, glowing like living gold, rose toward its fate. His journey was far from over. His purpose had only begun to breathe. The river rose like a ribbon of living gold, drifting upward through the trembling air that surrounded Hephaestus' forge. For ages uncounted, the mountain had known only the roar of flame, the groan of stone, and the lonely heartbeat of the god who dwelled within it. But tonight, Something new approached, something the mountain had never seen since the first dawn cracked open the world. The river felt the heat intensify as it ascended the rocky throat of the mountain. Lava flowed in heavy sheets beneath it, slow as breathing beasts, glowing with ancient memory. Every stone in this place had been shaped by fire, molded, broken, reforged 1,000 times. The river wondered if it belonged here at all. Water was not made for mountains of flame, but the ember inside it answered with a steady glow. You belong wherever you are needed. The river pushed upward. At last, it reached a ledge carved by volcanic storms, a balcony overlooking the eternal fires below. A cavern mouth yawned before it, dark and shimmering with heat. Inside, something glowed with a bright and rhythmic pulse. Hephaestus, the god of the forge, sat hunched before his great anvil, a titan of shadow and flame. His shoulders bore the weight of millennia, and though his hands were made of strength itself, they trembled with exhaustion. Sparks dripped from his fingers like falling stars. The river took a hesitant step, flowing into the cavern like a shining mist, and felt fear for the first time since the ember touched it. What if Hephaestus regretted giving the ember away? What if the river had changed too much? What if it had failed? But Hephaestus looked up, and the moment his eyes met the river's glow, the entire mountain softened. "You came," the god whispered, voice cracking like cooling steel. The river bowed, unsure how to speak under the gaze of a deity so ancient. "The ember led me," it replied quietly. "It wished to return." Hephaestus rose from his seat, his massive form radiating heat that shook the air. Sparks drifted from his hair. Embers glowed beneath his skin, like fireflies trapped in crystal. "Not return," he corrected, stepping forward with a gentleness at odds with his power. "Become." He reached toward the river, but paused inches away, as though afraid the touch might hurt. "You have carried my sorrow," he said, "and my hope. You have given them a place to breathe." The ember inside the river stirred, glowing through the water like a heartbeat. Hephaestus' expression tightened, a look of grief, pride, and reverence woven into one. "I forged that ember on the day I lost what mattered most," the god murmured. "I poured into it everything I could not say, everything I could not let myself feel." His hand hovered over the river, fingers trembling. "I never expected it to survive, let alone awaken." The river felt the ember's warmth spreading through its currents, wrapping them both in a soft glow. "Hephaestus," the river whispered, "what is the ember meant to become?" The god's gaze shifted, not to the river, but to something deeper within the forge. Something the river had not noticed at first. A shadow. No, a chamber. A chamber sealed by stone and flame, carved with symbols older than Olympus itself. The river felt a pulse from within it, faint but unmistakable. A second heartbeat, a sleeping presence. Hephaestus inhaled deeply, as if pulling breath from the core of the world. "I will show you," he said. He lifted his hammer, the very first hammer he ever forged, and struck the sealed chamber door. The mountain shook, Flames spiraled upward like startled spirits. The stone cracked, glowing from within. The river recoiled instinctively, but the ember inside it pulsed, calming its fear. It knew this magic. It knew this chamber. Somehow it had always known. With a final strike, the stone door burst apart in a wave of molten light, and the river saw what lay inside. A cradle, forged from obsidian and starlight, empty except for a small hollow in the center, shaped like a heart. The river froze. That hollow glowed softly, in the exact rhythm of the ember inside its currents. Hephaestus stepped beside the river, voice breaking. "This was meant for my child." Silence swallowed the cavern. "My first creation," he whispered, "my greatest hope, and my deepest wound." The river felt the ember tremble. "For ages, I kept this cradle hidden. I told myself the world was not ready for what it once held. I told myself I was not ready." His gaze shifted to the river, gentle, sorrowful, grateful. "But you have carried the ember farther than I ever could. You have kept it alive. You have given it memory, and breath, and purpose." He stepped back, offering space. "Now," he said softly, "you must decide." The cradle glowed brighter. The ember pulsed within the river. Slowly, very slowly, the river let its currents rise, lifting the ember from within its body. It floated upward like a golden tear, like a sun being born, and drifted toward the cradle. But before it touched, the mountain rumbled violently. The shadows beneath the earth stirred. The same ancient voices from the deep hissed through the cavern. "Water and flame must never become one." Hephaestus' eyes blazed. "They dare to interfere." The shadows poured up the cavern walls like living smoke, ancient beings that had slumbered beneath the earth since before gods named their powers. They gathered like storm clouds, coiling around the cradle. "You cannot breathe fire into water," they snarled. "You cannot rewrite the balance." The river felt fear grip its core, but the ember pulsed fiercely, as if defying the darkness. Hephaestus stepped forward, radiating flame so intense the cavern walls glowed white. "The balance changes," he growled. "When the world needs it to." He raised his hammer, but the shadows surged faster. They struck at the cradle. They struck at the ember. They struck at the river. And in that instant, that breathless moment where all futures hung in silence, the ember flared with a brilliance the forge had not seen since the dawn of creation. The river felt itself dissolve into light. Hephaestus' roar shook the heavens. The shadows screamed, and the ember awakened. The cavern was full of light. It flooded the forge in a single breath, pure gold, trembling with memory. Every stone, every shard of obsidian, every coil of smoke froze as the ember awakened. The shadows recoiled, their forms unraveling like cloth set aflame. Hephaestus shielded his eyes with one massive arm, though his soul strained forward, yearning for the light he had not seen in an age. The river, now half water and half radiance, felt itself lifted from the earth. It did not have a body anymore, not one bound to flow or shape. It rose like a column of living dawn, glowing from within, its currents swirling in patterns no mortal eye could follow. And from the very center of that glow, the ember pulsed. Slowly, steadily, alive. Hephaestus lowered his hand, awe softening the fire in his gaze. You remembered, he whispered, not to the river, nor to the shadows, but to the ember itself. The cavern shook with currents of light and heat. Everywhere the ember touched, molten stone cooled, and cooled stone melted, as if the world could not decide what shape to take. And then a voice, not spoken aloud, not carried through flame or water, a voice that was everywhere and nowhere. I am here. The river felt its essence tremble. For the first time, it sensed the presence that had slept inside the ember. Not a memory, not a fragment of grief, but a soul. Hephaestus fell to one knee, breath shaking. My child! The shadows screamed, though now their screams were thin, small, desperate. They clung to the walls, to the cracks, to the dark places where forgotten things hid. You cannot return, they hissed. The world has moved on. You do not belong. But the light of the ember grew. It swelled, warm as sunrise, soft as breath, ancient as the first spark that ever split the night. I belong, the light said. As long as I am remembered. The river realized then. The ember was not just a piece of sorrow Hephaestus had given away. It was a child he had lost. A creation he had loved so deeply that its absence had torn a wound in the world. And somehow, impossibly, the river had carried that lost soul back home. The shadows lashed out in fear, their forms warping, clawing, burning. They struck the cradle. They struck the river. They struck the heart of the ember itself. But the river stood firm. It wrapped itself around the cradle, glowing brighter than molten gold, forming a barrier of liquid fire water. Something the world had never known before. Hephaestus stepped forward, and this time he did not hesitate. He raised his hammer and struck the shadows. One blow. A sound like thunder cracking through the bones of mountains. The shadows tore apart, scattering like dust swept into a storm. One by one, they dissolved, hissing, screeching, begging, fading. When silence fell, it fell completely. The ember's glow softened to a gentle golden radiance that filled the forge with warmth, not heat. The river lowered itself, shaping once more into flowing water, though now streaks of light wove through its currents like veins of living gold. The ember hovered above the cradle, pulsing softly. Hephaestus approached, each step heavy with fear, hope, and reverence. Will you? His voice broke. He knelt. Will you return to me? For a moment, there was only silence. Then the ember drifted downward, settling into the cradle of obsidian and starlight. The moment it touched the hollow, the entire forge transformed. The walls glowed with veins of pale fire. The air softened, turning warm and gentle. The mountain ceased its angry trembling. A breeze, impossible in a place of flame, swept through, and the ember became more than light. It shaped itself, slowly, gently, like clay molded by divine hands. A small form lay in the cradle, not flesh and bone, but a body made of fire and memory, wrapped in a faint shimmer of golden mist. Hephaestus collapsed forward, catching himself on trembling arms. "My child," he whispered, tears falling not as sparks this time, but as droplets of pure, molten light. "My heart." The river felt something inside itself loosen, a knot of ancient tension unraveling. This was the purpose of its journey. Not to become fire, not to become something else, but to return what had been lost. The newborn being opened eyes that glowed like twin suns softened by dawn. It reached out, not to Hephaestus first, but to the river. "You carried me," it said, voice like warm rain falling on embers. "You held me when I was only memory. You gave me the shape of breath." The river rippled with emotion. "I only followed your light. That is why I choose this," the being said. It lifted a hand, small, radiant, shimmering, and placed it gently against the river's surface. Light flowed from its fingertips into the river's currents. Warmth, strength, a spark of something new. "You will not fade when you leave this mountain," the child of fire said. "You will carry a piece of me forever." The river glowed brighter, its waters swirling with patterns like runes, like constellations drawn in gold. "You are no longer only water," the child whispered. "You are the fire that remembers." Hephaestus stood, tears still falling, and placed a hand on the river's surface. "You have done what even a god could not," he said. "You carried my grief, and now you carry my gratitude." The river flowed silently beneath his touch, warmth and peace filling every current. The mountain opened above them, its stone parting like curtains drawn aside by invisible hands. A path of golden mist traced from the forge back into the world. The river felt the pull of its source, the quiet forests, the starlit pools, the places where water still whispered ancient songs. It turned to Hephaestus and the reborn ember child one last time. "Will we meet again?" it asked. Hephaestus smiled, his face soft with pride. "All things that burn with truth find their way back to each other." The child nodded. "And you burn, river, more brightly than you know." With that blessing echoing through its currents, the river flowed upward through the mountain, through the bright crack of sky, back into the world that needed its light. As it returned to its bed, its waters shimmered gold beneath the moon. Every ripple whispered a new story, one of sorrow carried, fire reborn, and a god's heart made whole again. And far beneath the world, in a forge where flame and love were born together, a cradle glowed softly, holding a child who dreamed in embers. And the river that dreamed of fire became the river that remembered light.